I'm here to testify in favor of House Bill 5389, an act requiring state employees in human service roles to work on site. I'm not going to read my testimony. I figured I would just give a summary here. But there's a couple of drivers that I suggest that we take a look at this issue. The work from home status that was granted onto state employees went through arbitration, did not come through a collective bargaining process where the state could actually sort of weigh in the legislature, the policy decisions. And so it's difficult for us to get our arms around the impacts of the work from home. What we do hear from constituents is that they have a hard time getting people on the phone in certain agencies, especially in social services. And a lot of our constituents have begun to rely on the legislative branch to sort of help facilitate interaction with the administrative branch. And I think it's driven in part because we don't have buildings in downtown Hartford that are filled with our employees. The impact on the city of Hartford alone, I think, is significant. It certainly does impact the economic engine throughout the city of Hartford, and I think we should be looking at it. But the real driver for me that prompted our caucus to put this bill in are 3 reports from the Child Advocate over the deaths of 3 children that were under DCF care. In these reports, we have this one agency that could drill down on what is happening when a death occurs. We don't get that level of scrutiny for any agencies throughout the state of Connecticut, except for under these kind of circumstances. In 2 of her reports, one was dated in November, October, one was dated in February 2024, the DCF supervisor is citing the need to assess telework and the impact that it's having on this agency. Specifically in the report from October of 2023, the advocate states that OCA found that the basic agency standard for case assessment supervision, critical functions of the agency, including engagement with children and families, as well as recruitment and retention of staff, professional development and supervision, and whether DCF can meet its mandates with a largely virtual workforce. Legislative inquiry is warranted. And so that's what I'm asking for today, is that we actually begin this inquiry. Their turnover is at a crisis level in the report from most recently, February 2024. They are finding that between 20 and 30% of DCF staff have left the workforce, and they're having difficulty in getting case workers out into the field. The fact that 3 children have died this year under state care, to me, if that doesn't motivate us to take a look at telework, I don't know what will. But I think we have to assess it because it's gone on unilaterally from the state perspective without any evaluation of whether or not critical jobs are being performed and who is staying home, who could do their job from home, and who needs to be out in the field. And even for those that have field work are only required to be out in the field 1 day a week. And I think especially when we're dealing with human lives, we need to make an assessment and give the commissioners some flexibility to call people back when it's needed. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, are there any questions? Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Minority Leader. Nice to see you up there. Thank you very much for your testimony. I was just kind of poking around the other testimony that was submitted, and there's a lot of testimony from DSS employees in opposition. They say telework is working. I mean, obviously, I've got no way of knowing that.
Right.
And I'm receiving constituent, calls as well, and certainly frustrated with, a lot of state agencies in recent years. I mean, we pay more for our state government than ever, and yet today you need to make an appointment to go to DMV, for example, instead of being able to walk in. I mean, and I think that's a disconnect for a lot of people, and maybe that's why our constituents are concerned as well. Is there a way of knowing? Well, first off, is this limited to, well, let me ask you this. Which state agencies do you think are most affected? Is it DSS, DCF?
Well, obviously, we have this report from the Office of Child Advocate that is specifically citing DCF, and I think they're put under a microscope for obvious reasons. I mean, we have children dying, so that prompts a report. The other agencies, we deal with anecdotes. So, I know I get phone calls, pistol permit renewals are taking over 12 weeks. I don't know why that is happening. DMV, you wait 3 weeks now for an appointment where before you could walk in a single day. That might, an online platform might be okay, but are we as productive as we were 4 years ago? We just don't know. There are no assessments in place whatsoever. And I think at the very least, we should be in a position to start assessing where it's working and where it's not, just like in the private sector. I'm not saying get rid of telework, but I am saying we need to assess where the benefits are and where it is working. In reading through the testimony opposition, the perspective is I'm able to do my job from home and therefore I should be entitled to continue it. But it doesn't analyze it from the global perspective. It's not just one individual doing their job. We need to look at the impact of the entire team in its entirety. And the Office of Child Advocate is suggesting that DCF can't keep their workers because they're leaving because they don't feel connected to a team. And so to have a 30% turnover is alarming when you're dealing with children, the most vulnerable children in our population. So I think it's a crisis situation that we need to look at. And I can't tell you today, other than DCF, what other areas are a problem other than the anecdotal remarks we get from constituents.
No, I completely understand that too, and it's very interesting. Reading the testimony, a lot of it seems disconnected. Most folks are saying that telework is a good thing. We can make it work, and I don't disagree with that. But there's got to be some system in place that actually makes it effective and accountable. And I think that's where we're lacking. The bill language itself, it seems, forgive me for saying this, but it seems kind of weak. It's just, the commissioner of a state agency may require some sort of work on site requirement. Is this what was really envisioned, or are we trying to get somewhere else?
So I think right now this was sort of put in as a stopgap measure. Again, I say when children are dying, there needs to be the ability for a DCF commissioner to say, I need some of these people back at a more frequent level. So, but I think globally this bill should go further. I think we should be putting forth a task force to assess the benefits and what measures we could put in place to measure the productivity. Analyzing, are we processing the same amount of licenses every year or car registrations every year? Is that working? So I do think we need to expand this further and have assessment tools. Because after all, it goes without saying, these are our tax dollars. We are all public servants. Some of us are elected. Some of us are appointed and working for agencies. But ultimately, we are serving the public, and we need to make sure that the services we're performing is getting done in a way that's helping everybody, and it's efficient for our tax dollars.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that the public deserves accountability, and I do think the bill should go further. So I will certainly be delighted to work with you and anyone else to put that in place. Just a quick one final question about this, which is, how did we get here anyway? I mean, I know this all began during the pandemic with some sort of action from the administration, but don't these different agency commissioners already have the authority to be setting these parameters, or is that coming from somewhere else?
So my understanding is that the parameters were set through the arbitration award. So I think that it's 1 day in the office, 4 days at home, and I think the commissioners just need to make do and rotate people in and out accordingly. And I think when you speak to commissioners, they certainly privately express concern over this current structure. I wish they would come forward to have that conversation, and maybe the leadership of the committee could begin to survey some of our agency leadership to see how they think it's working out and what level of control they do have over the functionings of their offices.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Mr. Minority Leader, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Representative Weir.
Thank you, Mr. Minority Leader. Good to see you there. Owning a small business, we didn't have really the flexibility at all to work from remotely, even from the very early on. My role and our role was in person, so I share your frustration. I've heard it from many constituents when here we are, 4 years removed from probably the onset of COVID, when everybody was trying to figure out how to balance work and life and everything else. Switching gears here to one of the statements you made in your testimony was the effect on the cities and how having people working from home has affected the economies. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, maybe a little detail?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of office buildings in Hartford that are empty right now. If you just go across the street to some of our agencies, it's quite amazing the amount of millions of dollars we just put into renovating the one building on Capitol Avenue that's virtually empty every time you go there. So people aren't going out to lunch. We all frequent restaurants in this area when we're up in Hartford, and it's a ghost town. The food trucks are gone. They never came back. So this certainly has had an impact, on the city of Hartford. And I think collectively, it is our capital city, and we should be supporting it. And the revenue that could be generated from employees working in the city are obviously now being dispersed and scattered among the suburbs as people are working from home. So, is that a reason to bring them back? Maybe, maybe not, but I think it needs to be part of the conversation, is what is the impact this has had on our capital city, and I think that's just part of the equation, and I did include that in my testimony for that reason.
Any other? Representative Acker.
Thank you. Good to see you there. Appreciate your efforts. And I do agree. I mean, there are areas that I've looked at. Constituents contact us. That's the biggest concerns that we have. Is a constituent calls us and says, I can't get a hold of such and such. Or I had a person that was trying to register a vehicle. They've cleaned that act up a little bit in DMV, and I give them credit for that. Where he bought a work vehicle, and they said, well, you can register in 3 weeks. And he goes, do you understand this is a work vehicle? It needs to be on the road tomorrow. And so I really need somebody to show up and help me out with that. But what are the concerns? And I like the way you pose this, that the commissioner makes the decision, because there are jobs that can probably do fully remote. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that we should be removing telework from the toolbox, but there has to be an assessment. My understanding, and I haven't been able to confirm it yet, but our materials testing lab in Connecticut are now remote working. This is a lab that's testing our concrete. If in fact we're now down to 1 day a week, that's going to have an impact on construction throughout Connecticut. How do people that need to be testing in a lab, how are they able to work from home for 4 days a week? I don't know. But I think we need to take a look at it and at least assess it.
Right. As Representative Weir mentioned, there's some jobs you just cannot do while sitting at a desk at home. One of the things that shocked me in the beginning of this whole transition was the fact that their phones don't roll over, like roll to their home phone. And so but they mentioned that but we check our phone often. And to this day and age, as we all know, you want to have somebody at the other end when you need them at the other end.
Yeah, it's a good point. I will say I had a constituent last week whose daughter is in stage 4 cancer and had a surgery the following day. Her insurance was inadvertently dropped by DSS. The family was on the phone for 24 hours trying to get a hold of somebody to make sure that her surgery the next day would be covered. Thankfully, they were able to think to reach out to me, and we were able to get a hold of somebody at DCF to restore it. Here's a woman who's fighting for her life and can't get somebody on the phone to alleviate her concerns of whether or not she could have a cancer surgery the next day. And that is the reality that we're facing every single day. The fact that these 3 children died under DCF care, it's one thing not be able to renew your license, but you can't get a life back. And when we say this is hitting crisis level, I think it is. And the testimony that was submitted saying, well, it's arbitrary giving the commissioner the ability to call people back. It's just as arbitrary to say I only need to go in the office 1 day a week. Why isn't it 2 days? Why isn't it 3 days? And we're not part of that conversation. And I think we as a legislature have a responsibility to make sure as a policy government is running correctly for the people. And so this arbitrary decision of letting people just work from home 1 day a week might not cut it for certain agencies. Maybe it does for, you know, an auditing agency or bookkeeping or HR. But when you're doing field work, I don't know how that 1 day is appropriate. And so I'm just saying we've got to look at this.
I appreciate that, and I agree. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Minority Leader.